What if the only ones who could reveal a crime walked on four legs? One storm-drenched night in Charleston, a Marine returned home earlier than expected. On his porch, 3 small German Shepherd pups shivered together in the chill. Inside, he was met by a familiar smile, and the unsettling presence of a stranger. By sunrise, those very pups would scratch at a cupboard, nose at a teacup, and guide their master to a hidden truth that had stolen the heartbeat of a good woman. They had no voices, yet their noses remembered. And with that memory, they would save a family. What follows is a tale that may both break your heart and mend your faith in second chances. Before we dive in, let me know where you're tuning in from. Drop your country in the comments. And if you believe no person or animal should ever be left forgotten in the cold, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Stay with us until the end, because this story may just renew your belief in miracles. The late afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, was bathed in a soft golden light, the sun casting its last warmth through towering oaks draped in Spanish moss. Along the cobblestone streets, history mingled with modern life. That Saturday, the air was filled with laughter, fiddles, and the sweet aroma of roasted peanuts and candied apples drifting through the breeze. The annual harvest fair was alive and buzzing. Marion Square had transformed into a carnival of hay bales, handmade booths, darting children, and families soaking in the last glow before winter's chill arrived. The air carried just a hint of crispness, a quiet reminder of seasons turning. Into this picture stepped Jack Rohr. He moved with the measured steadiness of someone long accustomed to order and discipline, yet his eyes betrayed the weight of a past that would not leave him. At 40, Jack's frame bore the mark of years in the Marine Corps, broad shoulders, a lean runner's body. His short black hair was flecked with gray at the temples, his skin weathered from sun and wind, and a thin scar traced his jawline like a permanent reminder of battles fought. Hazel eyes, quiet, steady, often looked beyond the present, as though searching for ghosts he could never quite let go. He wore a plain flannel shirt tucked into worn jeans, heavy boots built for use, not for show. Charleston wasn't his birthplace, but after leaving the Corps, drifting from one odd job to another, he had finally settled here, hoping for a life quieter than the one he had known. Outwardly, Jack carried himself with calm control. Yet inside, he wrestled with an unease, the gnawing thought that his best purpose had been left behind when he'd taken off his uniform. That day he wandered between stalls, nodding politely to strangers, pausing to listen as a children's choir sang hymns, their voices wobbling yet full of joy. He wasn't searching for connection. Certainly not for family. But fate rarely honors a soldier's plans. Toward the far end of the square, under a striped canvas tent, a cluster of children sat laughing, their faces glowing with delight. At the center stood Emily Carter, though Jack didn't yet know her name. He stopped mid-stride, caught by something he couldn't explain. Emily was in her early 30s, and warmth seemed to radiate from her as naturally as sunlight over Charleston's rooftops. Of medium height, slender but sturdy, she had auburn hair that cascaded in soft waves past her shoulders, catching light like burnished copper. Her green eyes gleamed with life as she bent to meet the children at eye level, her wide smile genuine and unforced. She wore a simple cream dress patterned with faded leaves and scuffed brown boots that spoke more of use than fashion. Her posture was open, welcoming, someone who leaned close when listening, who wiped away a child's tears without hesitation, who clasped small hands with instinctive tenderness. A second-grade teacher, Emily carried patience in her voice, delight in her storytelling, and respect for every curious question placed before her. Her life, though, had been marked by loss. At 16, she had watched her firefighter father perish in a warehouse blaze, leaving her mother to raise her alone. That tragedy had cut compassion deep into her soul, shaping her resolve to bring love where absence once hollowed her. For Emily, kindness wasn't theory, it was a promise. Jack lingered as she threw herself into a tale, her arms waving, her voice rising and falling with theatrical charm, pulling laughter from the children. For the first time in years, Jack felt a quiet stillness inside. And when Emily's eyes lifted and caught his, she smiled, a small, unguarded smile that struck him harder than any command ever had. He found himself stepping closer, as if pulled by a current he could neither name nor resist. Hovering nearby was Laura Bennett, Emily's lifelong friend. Though she stood politely, her watchful gaze carried a sharpness most would miss. Laura, 35, was shorter and fuller in build, with dark hair bound tightly into a no-nonsense bun. Today she wore slacks and a cardigan, but even out of uniform, she carried herself with the authority of a nurse long used to tense hospital corridors. Laura had been Emily's steadfast anchor since their college days. Yet where Emily's kindness seemed effortless, Laura's generosity often felt measured, as if weighed before being offered. Beneath her composure smoldered a possessive loyalty, born from years of feeling overshadowed by Emily's natural ease. Jack approached after Emily's story drew to a close and the children scattered to new amusements. His voice was low, steady, touched with the clipped precision of military speech, but softened with an awkward shyness he hadn't felt since boyhood. Emily returned his greeting warmly, curious about the stranger whose watchful eyes had lingered on her. They spoke first of small things, the weather, the festival food, the joy of families gathering, but underneath ran a current of recognition, a sense that this meeting was no accident. Laura soon joined, slipping into the conversation with a smile that didn't quite mask the edge in her tone. She teased Emily about always drawing admirers, her words playful yet barbed. Jack noticed but didn't fully grasp the tension. As dusk settled and lanterns flickered alight, the festival began winding down. Jack offered to help Emily carry leftover crafts her students had made. Together they walked toward the parking lot, Laura following a step behind, quiet and unreadable. It was there, by a dumpster's shadow, that Jack's trained ears caught a faint whimper. He stopped, scanning instinctively as though back on patrol. Emily, sensing his sudden alertness, asked, "What is it?" Kneeling, Jack pulled aside a damp cardboard box. Inside huddled 3 tiny German shepherd pups, no older than 6 weeks. Their thin coats were tangled and damp, ribs faint beneath fur, eyes wide with fear yet glimmering with hope. The largest pup, who would later be called Rex, tried to growl, but only managed a weak, rasping whine. Beside him, Juno, a wiry little one with a single floppy ear and a white patch on her chest, nudged the others forward as if urging them to be brave. The last, Luna, pressed close to her siblings, solemn eyes dark and searching, tiny paws clutching the soggy box edge. Emily gasped, instantly gathering the frailest into her arms. "Who could do this?" she whispered, grief and protectiveness flooding her voice. Jack's jaw tightened as he lifted the remaining 2, his grip careful, almost reverent. He felt their tiny hearts racing against his palms, the will to live still fierce within them. From behind, Laura folded her arms. "They're strays," she said flatly. "It happens. You can't save every abandoned animal." But Emily spun, fire blazing in her eyes. "We can save these 3, she said firmly. Jack met her gaze and nodded. "Then we will." And in that quiet moment, without speeches or ceremony, a decision was made. A Marine who thought his mission was gone and a teacher who had always lived to protect had just found their lives bound together, by 3 trembling pups in a discarded box. As lanterns glowed against Charleston's humid night, Jack, Emily, and the puppies walked away from the fairgrounds. None of them knew that this simple choice would ignite a story of love, betrayal, and resilience that would change everything. The weeks following the Harvest Festival seemed to unfold more slowly, as if time itself had stretched into something gentler. Charleston shifted from warm autumn afternoons into the sharper winds of late November. The oaks shed their last leaves, and the smell of wood smoke mingled with the salty tang drifting in from the harbor. In a modest house Jack had rented on the city's edge, a whitewashed home with a sea-green porch, something new began to take shape. What had once been only a place to sleep became the beginnings of a family. Jack, who once woke each day convinced his mission had ended with his discharge papers, now rose with renewed purpose. Rex, Juno, and Luna needed feeding before dawn, walks around the yard, and more affection than he ever thought himself capable of giving. Emily was beside him at every turn. Her move into Jack's home had been swift, even surprising to her. One by one, her belongings left the small apartment near her school and found space in Jack's rooms, her laughter filling corners that had been silent for too long. Where once the house had been empty, now it pulsed with life. Emily thrived in this new rhythm. She sewed blankets for the puppies from old quilts her mother had saved. She filled the kitchen with stews and cornbread, smells that wrapped the house in permanence. She coaxed Jack to let the pups sleep at the foot of the bed, laughing at his mock protests. Slowly, Jack's rigid edges softened. His voice, once sharpened by battlefield necessity, now gentled in the presence of Emily and the pups. The dogs flourished under their care. Rex grew quickly, his oversized paws a promise of the large shepherd he would become, protective, bold, always alert. Juno, smaller and wirier, turned into the climber, always perching on chairs or pawing windows, curiosity driving her every move. Luna, softest of the three, attached herself to Emily like a shadow, curling near her whenever she graded papers or read aloud. To Jack and Emily, they weren't animals, they were children, each with a growing personality that made the days richer. It was inevitable, then, that Jack and Emily's bond deepened. What began with chance at a festival ripened into love both strong and undeniable. Their wedding, held in a small chapel in Charleston's historic quarter, wasn't grand, but it was sincere. The pews filled with Emily's fellow teachers, a handful of Jack's Marine comrades, and neighbors who had seen his life transform. Emily wore a borrowed lace gown, simple but radiant. Jack stood in a tailored navy suit that could not fully disguise his soldier's bearing. At their feet sat Rex, Juno, and Luna, each adorned with ribbon collars, tails thumping as though they knew they were part of the vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation chuckled as the pups barked in unison, sealing the moment with canine joy. Among the guests sat Laura Bennett. She wore a pale blue dress, her dark hair neatly pinned, her smile practiced. She applauded, hugged, and congratulated, but her eyes rarely left Jack and Emily. Her voice carried warmth, but also a stiffness that seemed to strain under the weight of every word. Later, during the courtyard reception, she toasted Emily with compliments that sounded suspiciously like warnings. "You've been blessed, Emily. Not everyone finds this much happiness. Be careful you don't take it for granted." Most took it as a nurse's sober wisdom. Jack, however, noted the odd tone, though he said nothing. Married life for Jack and Emily blossomed in quiet beauty. Mornings began with Emily rushing to school while Jack wrangled the dogs in the yard. Evenings were spent in the kitchen, Emily stirring sauces, Jack chopping vegetables with a focus that once belonged to rations in the field. The pups grew into obedience under Jack's patient drills, though Emily often spoiled them with treats, laughing at his mock sternness. Yet Laura remained ever present. She stopped by often after hospital shifts, sometimes with casseroles, sometimes with excuses to check on Emily. Outwardly, she was loyal and dependable. Yet in unguarded moments, her comments carried bitterness. "You're lucky, Emily," she said once as the four of them sat on the porch, the dogs tumbling in the yard. "Some of us work 12-hour shifts and come home to silence. Not everyone has a Marine carrying boxes for them and 3 puppies at their feet." Emily brushed it off with laughter, but Jack saw something fleeting and sharp in Laura's eyes before it vanished. As months passed, Jack and Emily began to dream of expanding their family. Emily, long desiring children, glowed when the test confirmed she was pregnant. Jack's cautious heart swelled at the thought of a child with her green eyes or auburn hair. They shared the news with Laura, expecting joy. She smiled, toasted them with wine, but Jack thought he saw calculation in her gaze. The pregnancy soon turned difficult. Emily tired quickly, sometimes gripped by dizziness, sometimes pressing her hand to her chest with fleeting pain she tried to hide. Doctors warned of heart complications and prescribed strict rest. For Emily, who thrived on teaching and movement, confinement was a cruel weight. Jack became her shield, taking over chores, caring for the dogs, coaxing her to eat when her appetite faded. The pup seemed to sense her fragility. Luna rarely left her side, curling against her as if to lend strength. It was during this fragile time that Laura's involvement deepened. She visited daily, her role as nurse giving her reason. She brought teas, vitamins, and dietary advice. She cooked when Jack was away and sometimes insisted on feeding the dogs herself. Emily saw devotion, Jack felt unease he could not name. His instincts whispered caution, but he pushed them aside, telling himself it was the reflex of a soldier and used to trust. Still, fragments unsettled him. Words Laura muttered when Emily wasn't listening. "You don't know how lucky you are. Men like Jack don't come around twice. And those pups, they're treated better than most children. Almost unfair how fortune favors you." The tension built quietly until one winter evening when Emily, pale and weak, collapsed in the kitchen. Jack caught her before she fell, heart pounding as he carried her to the couch. The doctor's verdict afterward was shattering: the pregnancy had failed, and her weakened heart had grown worse. Emily wept softly that night in Jack's arms, mourning the child they would never know. The house, once so full of promise, sank into grief. Laura arrived the next morning, basket of medicines and meals in hand. She clasped Emily's hand with practiced sympathy. "You need rest. Let me handle things now. Trust me, Emily, I know what's best for you." Weakened, Emily nodded gratefully. Jack forced a polite smile, but unease churned in his gut. For the first time, he wondered whether Emily's friend's devotion might be something darker. Charleston's January arrived bitter, winds carrying the sting of the Atlantic. The house that once rang with laughter and pause now felt hollow. Holiday lights hung in neighboring porches mocked Jack with their cheer. And then, the unthinkable came. Emily Carter's death was sudden, though not unforeseen. Her heart had always been fragile, and when her condition worsened, not even Jack's watchfulness could hold back the inevitable. On a frigid night, after a fainting spell, she never woke again. She was just 32. Her absence carved into Jack a wound deeper than any battlefield scar. In the weeks that followed, Jack sat night after night beneath the dim glow of a lamp, the three pups pressed close around him. His once sharp hazel eyes dulled, his flannel shirt wrinkled, his boots left unlaced. A Marine who had survived combat now found himself undone, not by bullets, but by silence. Emily's absence was a void that thundered louder than any war. The dogs carried their grief differently. Rex, now large and restless, paced rooms protectively. Juno chewed furniture when Jack was gone, nerves sparking in her every movement. Luna curled in Emily's chair, whining softly, as if waiting for her return. Their presence was balm and torment both, reminders of Emily's love, and the void she left. Into that void stepped Laura Bennett. She arrived with folded laundry, casseroles, and the steady efficiency of a nurse used to crises. To neighbors, she appeared a blessing, Emily's loyal friend, ensuring Jack and the dogs did not drown in grief. But to Jack, her presence felt too quick, too eager, as though Emily's absence had left space she was all too ready to claim. The chill of January did not ease quickly. Charleston streets rattled with winter winds, shutters trembling, the Atlantic salt carried through every draft. Inside Jack's house, grief lingered like an unwelcome guest. Emily's laughter was gone, but Laura Bennett was not. Laura became a fixture almost overnight. She folded laundry, kept the dogs fed, scrubbed the kitchen until it gleamed. She spoke often of Emily. "She wanted me here, Jack. She used to say if anything happened, I'd be the one to keep things together." At first, Jack accepted it as kindness, a friend's way of honoring Emily's memory. But as the weeks passed, her words sharpened into something more insistent. Still drowning in loss, Jack threw himself into work at a construction firm. He left before dawn, returned after dark, muscles aching from long hours. In his absence, Laura cared for Rex, Juno, and Luna. Neighbors saw her daily, walking them, feeding them, brushing their coats. To the casual eye, she was already mistress of the house. Clara Dawson, the silver-haired widow 2 doors down, often remarked, "Those pups are lucky to have a mother figure again." Her well-meaning words never quite reached Jack's unsettled heart. At first, Jack felt grateful. But gradually, small shifts began. Emily's photographs disappeared from the mantel, tucked into drawers. When he asked, Laura's answer was soft but firm. "It will help you heal, not staring at reminders every day." She insisted on new dog food, claiming better nutrition, though Rex sometimes refused to eat. She folded laundry on Emily's side of the bed. She draped her coat over Emily's favorite chair. And always, she repeated, "This is what Emily would have wanted." The final crack came one evening when Jack returned home earlier than usual. Laura was in the kitchen, hair loose, sleeves rolled as she prepared dinner. The dogs lingered at her feet, restless. Jack bent to stroke Luna, but she flinched, something she had never done before. A chill passed through him, sharper than the winter air outside. Laura turned, smiling too smoothly. "You're home early. I was just about to feed them." The words were casual, but something in the scene stayed with him long after. Spring storms rolled in with thunder from the Atlantic. By then, change had taken hold in the household. Jack had remarried. The ceremony was modest, held in the same parish where Emily's funeral had been. Jack's decision was made reluctantly, but Laura, in pale lace, carried herself as though fate had finally delivered what was owed to her. Neighbors whispered it was soon, but also practical. A man of 40, alone with 3 demanding shepherds, companionship, they reasoned, was necessary. At first, Laura softened. She played with Rex, laughed at Juno's antics, let Luna curl in her lap. Jack felt a cautious relief, daring to hope for peace. But within weeks, rules arrived. "No more dogs in the bedroom," she declared, shutting the door at night while Rex, Juno, and Luna whined outside until exhaustion stilled them. "No running in the yard unsupervised. They ruin the garden." The gate was latched, their free gallops replaced with pacing. Most painful of all, she began restricting their time with Jack. "Down, give him space," she snapped when Rex pressed close. "Sit. Don't smother him," she scolded when Juno bounded to greet him. The dogs changed. Rex's bold stride faltered. Juno's tail drooped when Laura entered. Luna slunk to corners, eyes wary. Jack noticed, but told himself Laura was only enforcing order where Emily had been lenient. Work pulled him away again. A new government contract required him to travel upstate, leaving Monday mornings, returning Fridays. Each week, he returned to a house smelling of disinfectant, the dogs greeting him with subdued excitement. Their coats dulled, their ribs faint, their spirits dim. Clara Dawson noticed too. One Saturday, leaning across her fence, cardigan hanging loose on her tall frame, she said gently, "Jack, those pups don't look the same. I hardly see them in the yard anymore. Is everything all right?" Jack brushed it off, saying Laura kept them on a routine. Clara's eyes narrowed behind her glasses, remembering her ship captain father's cold discipline. She knew the silence fear could breed. Then came Michael Sanders. He was lanky, late 30s, with sandy hair swept carelessly back and restless energy in his gestures. Laura introduced him as a hospital colleague, though his reputation leaned more toward charmer and drifter. He laughed loudly, smoked on porches, carried himself like rules were for others. Jack shook his limp hand once, unsettled, but said nothing. Storm season reached its peak. One night, Jack's work ended early, and he drove home through sheets of rain, headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. He turned onto his street near midnight, boots crunching wet gravel as he stepped out. Before reaching the porch, he froze. Whining carried through the storm. There, in a soaked crate, huddled Rex, Juno, and Luna. Their coats slick with rain, their bodies trembling, eyes lifting in desperate relief when they saw him. Jack's chest surged with fury. Why were they outside, abandoned in this storm? He unlatched the crate, gathering them against him, their shivering bodies pressed close, tails thumping weakly. They had been left for hours. Inside, muffled laughter drifted from the living room. Jack's boots tracked mud as he strode in. Laura sat on the sofa, glass of wine in hand, her dark hair loose. Beside her lounged Michael Sanders, arm draped across the backrest. Smoke and perfume hung in the air. Laura startled at Jack's entrance, but quickly masked it. "You're home early," she said. Michael fumbled, brushing crumbs from his shirt, face flushing with guilt. Jack's voice was low, thunderous. "Why were the dogs outside?" Laura waved dismissively. "They were muddy, Jack. They needed to learn boundaries. They're fine." Jack's eyes blazed. "They're soaked through. They could have died out there." The room fell silent except for the storm battering the windows. The dogs whined at Jack's feet, pressing against him, their eyes flicking toward Laura with fear. Michael muttered something and stumbled out into the rain. Laura rose, her voice shifting from annoyance to false calm. "You're overreacting. I was teaching them discipline." And in that moment, clarity struck Jack like lightning. The woman who once cooed at the pups now treated them as obstacles to her comfort. She did it openly, in his own home. The whispers of unease became undeniable truth. The storm raged as though the sky itself bore witness. Rain hammered the roof, wind howled through the rafters, thunder cracked in jagged bursts. Inside, Jack stood dripping in the middle of the living room, fury radiating from every line of his body. Rex, Juno, and Luna pressed against his legs, their trembling bodies leaving muddy pawprints across the floor. Laura clutched her wineglass, hand unsteady, her eyes narrowing. "Jack, don't be ridiculous. They're just dogs." Jack's voice dropped into the command tone that had once carried across battlefields. "They're my family. Emily trusted me to protect them. And I let you turn this house into something she wouldn't recognize. Pack your things." The mask slipped from Laura's face. Her voice, low and cutting, hissed through clenched teeth. "You think you can survive without me? You think Emily could have survived without me?" Emily's name spoken from Laura's lips was a blade twisting in Jack's chest. He said nothing more. He simply opened the door, rain spilling across the threshold. After a long, tense silence, Laura snatched her coat, stormed past him, and slammed the door behind her. Her car's roar faded into the storm until only the thunder remained. For a long moment, Jack stood motionless, breath ragged. Then he sank to his knees, gathering Rex, Juno, and Luna into his arms. Rex nudged his chin, Juno pawed at his chest, Luna pressed her muzzle into his shoulder. "It's just us now," Jack whispered hoarsely. "Just us." The days that followed were strangely quiet. Without Laura's footsteps echoing through the kitchen or her clipped voice issuing commands, the house seemed to breathe again. Yet the silence brought new unease. Jack began to notice odd things, faint chemical odors clinging to the pantry shelves, scratches along the cupboard where the dog food was kept, and Luna's habit of avoiding a particular corner near the medicine cabinet. At first, he dismissed these signs as stress, but the dogs were insistent. Each evening when he returned from work, Rex would paw at the cabinet, growling low. Juno whined, circling. Luna barked softly, ears pinned, gaze fixed on the closed door. Their behavior repeated with unsettling precision. One evening, Jack finally pulled the cabinet open. Inside sat jars of vitamins, teas, and several unlabeled plastic bags of powder. He frowned, lifting one to his nose. A sharp, bitter scent hit him, strange, unnatural, unlike anything he had ever bought for Emily. He remembered Laura's words, "This is better for her heart. Trust me, I'm a nurse." His stomach tightened. He set the bag down carefully, the weight of dread settling over him. Seeking clarity, Jack drove across town to the modest brick house of Earl Jennings, a 70-year-old Marine veteran. Earl was wiry, with a shock of white hair, piercing blue eyes, and a cane he used more for habit than necessity. He had known Jack since his early service days and had always carried a kind of gruff wisdom. Jack laid it all out, the powders, the dog's behavior, the unease gnawing at him. Earl stroked his lined jaw, thoughtful. "Animals know, Jack," he said at last, his gravelly voice steady. "They can smell what we don't. Sense what we ignore. If those dogs keep pointing you to that cabinet, it's not chance. Trust them, and trust your gut. You've survived too much to dismiss it." That night, Jack lay awake, haunted by memories of Emily in her final months. Her faint lines of worry, the way she pressed her hand to her chest after meals, the dizziness she brushed off. He had trusted Laura then, trusted her medical knowledge, her reassurances. He had believed Emily's health was simply fragile. But what if it hadn't been fate? What if it had been something else? The next morning, with trembling hands, Jack emptied the powders into small jars, labeling them one by one. Rex, Juno, and Luna sat watching, ears pricked, eyes following his every move. He crouched before them, voice low. "You were trying to tell me, weren't you? All this time, you knew." Rex barked once, sharp and decisive, as if in answer. And in that moment, Jack could no longer ignore the truth clawing at him. Emily's death, sudden and devastating, might not have been cruel chance. It might have been something far darker, something planned. And the woman he had led into his home, the woman he had married in grief, might have been the hand that ended Emily's life. Charleston's spring mornings arrived deceptively bright, magnolia blossoms opening under clear skies, the harbor waters glittering in sunlight. Yet to Jack, the beauty felt heavy, like the stillness before a storm. Days had passed since he discovered the hidden powders, and the thought gnawed at him without rest. He had seen too much in combat not to recognize patterns, men poisoned in war zones, comrades betrayed by unseen dangers. Emily's fainting spells, her chest pains after meals, Laura's teas and nutritional supplements, none of it seemed like chance anymore. They looked like pieces of a puzzle he had been too blinded by grief to see. Jack gathered the powders, his notes on Emily's symptoms, and the names of neighbors who had witnessed Laura's frequent presence. With the same posture he had once carried into battle, he walked into the Charleston Police Department. At the front desk, he demanded to speak to someone who would listen. That someone was Detective Maria Jones. Maria was in her mid-40s, medium height, slender, with neatly coiled black hair pulled back into a bun. Her brown eyes, sharp behind square glasses, carried both calm and weight. She wore a navy blazer over a plain blouse, practical attire for a woman who lived in pursuit of truth. Years earlier, she had lost her younger brother in a hit-and-run case mishandled by careless officers. Since then, she had built a reputation for relentlessness, never dismissing even the smallest lead. Maria listened carefully as Jack laid out his suspicions. At first, her face remained unreadable, her pen moving steadily across her notepad. But when Jack described the dog's behavior, the way they pawed the cabinet, their fear of Laura, her brow furrowed. "Animals notice things we ignore," she murmured to herself. She examined the powders, sniffed one cautiously, then sealed it into an evidence bag. "This isn't anything I've seen on a pharmacy shelf. We'll run toxicology." Jack also gave her the names of witnesses. The next day, Clara Dawson, tall and reed-thin in her gray wool coat, arrived at the station. Adjusting her glasses, she told Maria how she had noticed the dogs becoming withdrawn, how Laura once bragged that Emily couldn't live without her guidance. Clara's voice shook, but her words carried the weight of conviction born of a lifetime of watching and listening. Maria gathered testimonies, filed reports, and soon obtained a court order to exhume Emily's body. When Jack heard, his stomach twisted. The thought of disturbing Emily's rest tore at him, but he knew it was the only path to truth. On the appointed morning, the cemetery was veiled in mist, dew clinging to grass like cold tears. Jack stood apart as workers lowered shovels into the earth, Rex, Juno, and Luna leashed at his side. Unusually still, the dogs watched with solemn eyes. When the coffin was lifted, Luna whimpered and pressed her head against Jack's leg, as if to shield him from the sight. Detective Jones stood near, her expression solemn yet steady. She laid a hand lightly on Jack's shoulder. "I know this is hard. But if your suspicions are right, this is how we'll find it." Samples were sent to the state lab in Columbia. While results were pending, Maria widened the inquiry. At the hospital where Laura had worked, she interviewed staff. Deborah Mills, a stout nurse with cropped gray hair, recalled Laura asking unusual questions about heart medications. "She once asked me if digitalis could be hidden in tea," Deborah said, frowning. "I thought it was idle curiosity, but now I'm not so sure." Dr. Samuel Price, a cardiologist with graying temples, added another thread. He remembered catching Laura in the supply room tampering with pill bottles. She had claimed she was checking expiration dates. Later, he discovered a patient's dosage altered without record. He had suspected her, but lacked proof. Meanwhile, at home, Jack tried to maintain routine. The dog seemed freer without Laura's presence. Rex strutted with renewed confidence. Juno played with her old reckless energy. Luna once again curled at Jack's feet without fear. Yet whenever they passed the street where Laura had parked, all three stiffened, ears pinned back, growls rumbling low. Their instincts reinforced Jack's own dread. Then, 1 week later, Maria called Jack back to her office. Rain pattered against the window as she slid a folder across her desk. Inside were charts and chemical readings, one line highlighted. Digitalis glycosides present in cardiac tissue. The same substance Laura had insisted would support Emily's heart, had in fact poisoned it. Jack's chest tightened, grief and rage colliding. He stared at the words until they blurred. "So it's true," he muttered. "She killed her." Maria's gaze was firm. "The evidence is strong. We'll build the case. But you need to be ready. She won't go down without a fight." That evening, Jack sat on the porch with Rex, Juno, and Luna. The magnolia blossoms scented the damp air. He thought of Emily, her laughter in the classroom, her fierce defense of the pups the day they were found in the box. He had promised to protect her family. Now justice for her was part of that promise. The dogs pressed close, their bodies warm anchors against his sorrow. They had been his companions, his witnesses, his silent soldiers. And now, at last, the truth was no longer buried. Detective Maria Jones knew from long experience that truth rarely arrived neatly packaged. It had to be pried loose, from careless words, hidden records, and the arrogance of those who thought they were untouchable. The toxicology report had given her leverage. Now she needed motive and method strong enough to withstand trial. Jack waited with simmering restraint as the investigation deepened. Evenings found him at home, the dogs never far from him. Rex kept guard at his feet, Juno lingered by the door, and Luna shadowed him from room to room. No longer fragile pups, they had grown into sleek, muscular adolescents, disciplined by Jack's quiet commands yet bound to him by love. One rainy evening, Maria returned to Jack's porch carrying a thick folder. Her navy blazer was damp at the shoulders, her glasses fogged slightly. Her expression was grim. "We subpoenaed Laura's phone records," she said, laying photographs on the table. The screenshots chilled Jack. They were text exchanges between Laura and a man named Darren Cole. Cole was in his early 40s, gaunt from years of hard living, his skin pockmarked, his eyes hollow with desperation. A petty criminal, known around North Charleston for small-time drug running, intimidation for loan sharks, and bungled thefts. The kind of man who would do anything for money, if he could do it at all. The messages left no room for doubt. "Take the dogs. Make it look like a break-in. They're the only ones that can ruin me." Dispose of them quietly. No trace. I'll pay double if it's done before he suspects. Jack's grip tightened on the papers, his jaw locking so hard it ached. Rage burned hotter than anything he had felt in combat. Rex, Juno, and Luna weren't just dogs. They were Emily's last gift, her legacy, the living witnesses of the truth. To imagine Laura plotting their deaths ignited a fury that shook him. And Maria wasn't finished. Investigators had uncovered more. On Laura's laptop were notes about fertility clinics and discreet surrogacy services. Phrases like securing lineage and guaranteed inheritance were scrawled across private files. It became clear, Laura's ambitions extended beyond Emily's death. She had intended to erase Emily's legacy entirely and replace it with her own, manipulating Jack into fatherhood, rewriting the family to her design. Witnesses added to the weight of the case. Dr. Samuel Price came forward again, describing Laura's suspicious tampering with pill bottles. Nurse Deborah Mills repeated her account of Laura's curiosity about digitalis in tea. Even Clara Dawson, steady and sharp behind her sliding spectacles, testified about what she had seen from her porch, the dogs shrinking from Laura, the house growing darker after Emily's death. The case built steadily, but Maria knew timing was everything. The dogs themselves reinforced urgency. Now free of Laura's daily shadow, they were livelier. Yet when her name was spoken, or when Jack walked past a street she once parked on, all three stiffened, growling low as if the scent of her still clung to the air. Then came the night Maria chose to act. With a warrant secured, officers set up surveillance near Laura's rental home. Jack was asked to stay behind, though every muscle in his body demanded to be there. He sat on his porch instead, the dogs restless, their ears pricked as though sensing what unfolded beyond sight. Near midnight, Darren Cole arrived in a beat-up truck. In the bed sat an empty crate lined with blankets, ready to smother sound. He never saw the net closing. Police vehicles slid into position, lights cutting through the dark at the last moment. Darren tried to bolt but stumbled, dragged down in seconds by trained hands. His phone was seized, messages from Laura still glowing on the screen, payment transfers fresh in the record. The next morning, Maria knocked on Jack's door. Her voice was steady, almost heavy. "It's time." Jack followed her through familiar Charleston streets to Laura's front step. His stomach knotted, fury simmering low. The dogs pressed their noses to the window as he left, whining, as if sensing the moment. Laura opened the door in a silk robe, her hair loose, surprise flashing across her face. She attempted a smile, but it faltered when she saw the officers arrayed behind Maria. Maria read the charges clearly: conspiracy, attempted animal cruelty, murder by poisoning. Jack stood a few steps back, arms crossed, gaze unyielding. As the handcuffs clicked, the silence of the street broke with a sudden sound: Rex's sharp bark, Juno's insistent growl, Luna's long, mournful howl. Their chorus carried from the open window of Jack's truck, echoing across the Charleston neighborhood. It wasn't noise. It was testimony. Neighbors stepped onto porches, whispering, watching. Laura's composure cracked under their eyes. Maria's voice cut the air as she ordered Laura into custody. "It's over." For Jack, it was no victory, only confirmation of the truth he had dreaded. Emily's death had not been fate. It had been murder. And the dogs, faithful from the start, had known all along. The trial of Laura Bennett quickly became the talk of Charleston. Each morning, crowds gathered at the courthouse, a neoclassical building of white columns and wide steps, its halls buzzing with anticipation. Reporters clustered with cameras, neighbors whispered, and strangers lingered, curious about the woman accused of poisoning her closest friend. Laura entered court no longer the composed nurse in crisp scrubs but a prisoner in an orange jumpsuit. Her dark hair was tied back harshly, her face stripped of its usual polish. Her eyes darted restlessly as the evidence mounted against her. Once she had moved through life with the confidence of someone who believed herself indispensable. Now every glance betrayed fear. The prosecution built its case piece by piece. Toxicology reports confirmed digitalis glycosides in Emily's tissue. Phone records displayed Laura's instructions to Darren Cole. Witnesses lined up one after another. Detective Maria Jones testified with quiet authority, her glasses catching courtroom light as she detailed every step, from the powders Jack had delivered to her office, to the exhumation, to Darren's attempted crime. Her calm precision left little room for doubt. Nurse Deborah Mills took the stand next, her voice brisk but steady. She recalled Laura's unsettling questions about hiding digitalis in teas. Dr. Samuel Price followed, describing the day he found Laura tampering with pill bottles, his suspicion sharpened by later discovering unrecorded dosage changes. Even Clara Dawson, tall and reed-thin with her perpetually sliding spectacles, spoke with a firmness that silenced the room. She told of the dogs shrinking from Laura, of Emily's house growing colder and darker after her death. Her testimony, soft-spoken yet resolute, carried the weight of someone who had watched life long enough to know when something was wrong. Through it all, Jack sat at the prosecution's table, posture straight, face composed like a soldier on duty. But beneath the discipline churned grief and fury. Though barred from the courtroom itself, Rex, Juno, and Luna waited outside each day with a handler from the K-9 unit. Their presence became a symbol, photographed by news crews, admired by onlookers. 3 German shepherds, once abandoned, now witnesses in a case larger than anyone had imagined. Their steady amber eyes seemed to watch over Jack, as though Emily's spirit lived through them. Laura's defense attempted to paint her as overburdened, a nurse pushed too far, a friend misunderstood. But the evidence crushed those claims. The texts to Darren Cole alone revealed intentions darker than any excuse could cover. When the jury returned, the courtroom hushed. The foreman stood, voice steady as he read the words that sealed Laura's fate. Guilty of murder by poisoning. Guilty of conspiracy to commit animal cruelty. Guilty of attempted fraud. A murmur rippled through the room. Laura's face drained of color, her composure crumbling. Judge Eleanor Hart presided that day. Gray-haired, stern yet measured, she had grown up poor in the textile towns of South Carolina, and she had no patience for cruelty dressed in pretense. Her voice cut like iron as she delivered sentence. You exploited trust. You twisted love into a weapon. This court will not permit such malice to walk free. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gavel struck. The room exhaled. For Jack, the words were not triumph. They were justice, cold and final. No ruling could bring Emily back. But at least truth had been spoken aloud, and the woman who had betrayed them both would never harm another soul. Outside the courthouse, the dogs waited. Rex stood tall, ears sharp. Juno wagged her tail anxiously at the sight of Jack. Luna pressed against his side as he knelt to greet them. Cameras flashed as neighbors watched silently. To many, it seemed as though the verdict had been punctuated by the presence of 3 loyal guardians. Jack stroked their heads, his eyes wet but steady. It's over, he whispered to them, though he knew the ache of loss would never truly end. The trial ended, but the echoes lingered. For weeks, Charleston hummed with talk of betrayal and justice, of the nurse who had poisoned her closest friend. Yet in the quiet of Jack's home, the noise of the world mattered little. The real work, the work of living again, began in silence. At first, the days were heavy. Jack moved through the house like a man relearning steps. Emily's laughter no longer filled the rooms, but her presence lingered in subtler ways, the quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed, the books she had marked with notes in the margins, the scent of lavender in drawers she once organized. Rex, Juno, and Luna were his anchors. They sensed his grief, pressing close in long silences, nudging him outside when the air grew too heavy indoors. On mornings when despair threatened to pin him down, Rex barked until he rose, Juno tugged at his sleeve, and Luna leaned against him with quiet insistence. They reminded him, each day, that life demanded movement. Slowly, the rhythm returned. Jack walked them through the city's oak-lined streets, neighbors greeting him with nods of respect. Clara Dawson often waved from her porch, her spectacles slipping as always, her smile gentler now. Sometimes she stopped him just to stroke Luna's ears, whispering, "Emily would be proud of you." Seasons turned. The dogs grew fully into their power and grace. Rex became a guardian in truth, broad-shouldered and unflinching, his bark a warning none dared test. Juno matured into a quick, agile companion, her eyes bright with restless intelligence. Luna remained the soft heart, her devotion constant, her presence always at Jack's side when night settled in. Together, they became more than companions. They were family, bound not only by love but by shared survival. It was during one of those long walks by the harbor that Jack made a decision. He could not undo what had been lost, but he could shape what came after. Emily had dedicated her life to nurturing her students, her friends, the stray pups abandoned at a festival. To honor her, Jack founded the Emily Carter Foundation, a nonprofit devoted to rescuing animals, funding heart research, and supporting veterans adjusting to civilian life. The foundation began modestly, a small office, a handful of volunteers, and 3 German shepherds that served as mascots. But its mission carried weight. Local papers covered its opening, donors stepped forward, and within a year, it had grown into a force of compassion across South Carolina. Stray dogs found homes. Families received support for cardiac care. Veterans discovered community and purpose. Through it all, Jack remained humble. He never sought recognition, allowing Emily's name to stand at the forefront. To him, the work was not charity, it was promise kept. Years passed. Jack's hair grayed, the lines at his eyes deepened, but his stride remained steady. Rex aged with noble dignity, Juno with playful resilience, Luna with tender loyalty. They slowed, as all creatures must, yet their bond never wavered. On quiet evenings, Jack often sat on the porch, the dogs at his feet, watching the sun bleed gold across the harbor. He would close his eyes and remember the girl with auburn hair who had knelt by a cardboard box of trembling pups, insisting they were worth saving. He thought of the betrayal that had nearly destroyed him, and of the justice that followed. But most of all, he thought of the love that had shaped his life, love fierce enough to endure war, grief, and loss, carried forward through the beating hearts of 3 dogs. One night, beneath a sky scattered with stars, Jack whispered softly, "We did it, Emily. We kept them safe. We kept your love alive." Rex gave a low, approving woof. Juno thumped her tail. Luna lifted her head, eyes bright in the starlight. And for the first time in many years, Jack felt not only the weight of memory but the lightness of renewal. He had walked through darkness and returned to something brighter. Not the same life, but a life remade. A life Emily would have recognized. A life she would have smiled upon.